My name is Haejin Yoo, and I'm an acrylic artist. I've been an artist for 10 years now. The way I started was that I was 25 years old and I was working full time in a corporate work environment, and I just felt like something was missing in my life. And one day, my little sister, who was studying architecture at the time, she just gave me one of the leftover hardboard and said, "Why don't you draw something on it?" And that's actually how it all started. I started doing illustration with color pencils, and then I've moved on to watercolors, and then I've moved on to experimenting various different mediums, including resins, and I've used oil painting and gouache as well. And it has evolved a lot over 10 years. It took me a long time to find my own color, and now I am predominantly using acrylic and acrylic mediums. My background actually isn't art. I actually studied biomedical science and then went on to do molecular biotechnology, and then I became a chemical regulatory affairs analyst, and I worked in the industry for 10 years till I decided that it just wasn't me. So now I'm a full-time artist. Yeah, it's not a strange mix. I think they both use similar part of the brain. I think they're both very creative as well. I think it just depends on the style of painting as well. I think my painting is quite, how do I say, detail orientated, and that part was quite similar to when I was doing science. I feel like having worked in that industry, it helps me now to have some sort of work structure because, being a full-time artist, you don't have anyone telling you what to do. You don't have a boss. You actually have to be quite independent and make sure you do the work every day, and I think that helps. I mostly paint portraits and flowers and animals. I like to make stories in my canvas. How I do it is I use symbolisms with animals and flowers. But I do a lot of portrait. I have one muse, which is my husband, Greg Beasley. I use him because a lot of the self-portraits and a lot of the stories that I do about myself, it's quite like painting a personal journal. I've never been a writer. I'm terrible at writing or speaking. So I express it through painting. Most of the time, it's not based on pretty stories and pleasant experiences. So self-portraits do tend to be quite dark. And I guess whenever I look at my husband, he's the purity and happiness that I feel I lack when I look at myself. So when I want to be happy and hopeful, I use him as a motive in my paintings because he's the purest person I know. I started painting on raw canvas by accident. I'm not quite sure how it came about. I flipped over a canvas one day and it just looked so natural, clean and blank. It's not easy to paint on raw canvas because you have to prime it first, and it made sense to me because that's how I feel like I'd like to live my life. Everything I achieve or everything that I work for, you have to make a proper ground to sow your seeds and nurture it and let them grow. And by using the raw canvas, it feels like I'm doing all of it from scratch. I like that it's challenging. The surface is a lot rougher than primed canvas, but that's what I actually like about it. So my painting technique is that I use raw canvas and then I lay the whole canvas with clear gesso, and from then on I build up foundation by using lots of thin layers of acrylic. I use a very small brush and there's a lot of scuffing involved and a lot of layering. Because acrylic doesn't mix like oil paintings, they dry quick, you have to use multiple brushes at the same time. And usually by end of each painting I would have gone through about 2-3 of the same brushes because they do end up getting damaged pretty quickly from the procedure. Because of a lot of layering techniques and using such small brushes. I could be painting something, let's say this big, and my brush is thinner than my pinky. This one behind me, it's 120 centimeter by 90. And that one took about 2 months of hard work every single day. I'd literally eat, poop, paint, and it took 2 months. Yeah, I think that's a bit unusual. That practice started since I moved to Europe from Australia, and when I first started using canvas as my personal journal, and this is how I see my life. Every hardship or every situation is like a small chapter in a book, and I feel like by stitching my name at the end of it, it feels like I'm sealing that part of the chapter. I actually personally dye the threads, so I have this white cotton thread and I go through the procedure of dyeing it red, and it has that symbolism of fate in Asian culture. This is the most challenging part that I'm still working on. What I'd like would be if my viewers saw it and could understand the story behind it without having it being explained so much. Also, I'd like to see that people actually can relate, because these emotions are something that everyone experiences, and my paintings, a lot of them are quite dark, but painting itself isn't, and it's to express that emotions aren't one-dimensional. Happiness can exist with sadness, and I would like to see, and I would like to hope that that gets understood. Massively, it's evolved. I couldn't figure out my own path for about 8 years. I did a lot of testing and I guess trial and failure. None of them really felt like it was me. I've done some abstracts in past and mixed media, and I've done some watercolor, or I've done some illustration, and what it came down to was to be genuine, and I felt that none of that was being my genuine self till now. I have a few at process. I'm what you call an active dreamer. I dream daily, very vividly, and sometimes I get ideas from that. And a lot of times I get ideas of experiences that have caused a strong emotion in me. So, funny story, since I am sitting in front of this painting, the way I started with this painting was that I had an incident in my life that caused a lot of anger and resentment. And way of expressing it, I started painting this piece. Amount of repetitiveness, it's almost like a moving meditation. By the end of this painting, I had forgotten about the whole experience. So I use personal stories, and another process would be that I have ideas from my husband, and he's my muse. So whenever I want to paint something happy and hopeful, I look at him and I get ideas from him. Some days I just lay down and I think about things that's been happening, and I'll show you. So I have multiple books I've already went through for the last 10 years, and I don't know if you can see, I make notes and write about my dreams. Once I write keywords, then from that I work up towards symbolisms and compositions, and I make a rough sketch in my book. Once that's done and I'm satisfied with that, I start with my canvas. Ever since I was 13, it was Frida Kahlo. I feel like a painting tells stories too of herself. It's like a personal journal. And it would be my husband. I do enjoy doing portraits, especially my husband's portrait, maybe because I love him so much. And also every time I do his portrait, if it does come out looking like my husband, then I'm like, oh, look at this! Look at this! That's the same as you! It amazes me. It makes me happy.
My name is Greg Beasley, and I am Haejin Yoo's husband. It makes me feel quite special, actually. It makes me feel very loved, and I'm really part of her journey as an artist, and I love that about being so close to her work. Haejin's really a really motivated, driven person, so she's always open and wanting to do better than the last painting that she's done. And I think it's really evident to see in her work. And certainly from what I've seen over the years, every piece she does just gets better and better.
My ultimate goal of being an artist is to relate with the viewers. My stories are a bit unusual, but I know that there's segments of those stories that is quite relatable to a lot of people in this world. Emotions aren't one-dimensional as my paintings are expressed. There's beauty within sadness, and I feel that a lot of people can relate to it. Moving to Australia at such a young age, alone, that's really hard. And in 2020, I had an exorcism with Korean shamans. I had something called spirit illness that I've suffered all my life. I won't go into details, but that was really scary. Scary but relieving, because since then I'm a different person. Also, changing my career was quite scary. Because I grew up alone, I had this personality that was quite rigid and always wanting to be safe. And I had built up quite a bit in my career that I had chosen before. And to let go of it and then giving it up and starting from nothing again was really frightening. And it took a while to work through, but I did, and I'm really glad that I did. It's really hard to say because I've put so much love into all of it, but strangely, I like the big 200 centimeter one turtle with my husband. It just makes me laugh when I see it, because that's just who he is, and it's a little quirky person. And I took that photo of him when he was hospitalized with appendicitis. I just thought it was really funny. He just has his own little imagination, and that painting just represents who he is, and I really like that one. Exorcism, spirit illness, that was a big thing. I have a series of that one. That was a huge moment in my life. In the beginning, I was a bit resentful that it took 35 years to find out. I've went to so many doctors all my life, and no one could tell me what was wrong with me, and I constantly suffered. I was resentful also that why it had to be me. But now I'm actually really grateful. I have a very interesting story, and it grew me as a person a lot, and I have a lot of insights from the situation. I've always liked to fly, but I don't think that's going to work. I've actually thought about this a lot of times. I think I'm too much of a realist. I would love to fly, but every time I think about flying, I think about how I'll freeze, and if I think about freezing, then I think about wearing really warm clothes, then I'm wondering, then everyone will see me flying, and if they see me fly, then someone's going to try to shoot me down, and then I'm like, well, that's not going to work, so I just go back to just being a normal person.
That's funny.